Well, that music can mean only one thing. It's time for the yearly summer breakdown, which means we're joined by our very good friend and a legendary favorite member of the show, Linus. Everyone's favorite show character and just all around good guy. And
if you keep saying all this nice stuff, I'm going to be on the podcast
all the time. That's what the people want. Actually, I think the people want more Linus, less Ike and I think is really what it is. It could just become Linus's old-timey camping equipment hour.
We just stopped answering fan mail because each and every one was just more requests for Linus.
More Linus.
Yeah. Well, as long as you keep giving me dog cookies, I'll keep appearing on the show.
Yeah, more Linus unboxings of vintage camping cooking equipment and things. Yeah, it's good. It's good. We get this highly rated content. Actually, we haven't even. The Linus Cribs tour of your tent at the Anarch thing was very popular.
That is something I'm trying to find is a period auto crib to hang in my car in case anyone ever wanted to have a child.
Is this a baby announcement? Is this a?
It's a real thing. It's a no. It's a real thing though. You can get a hanging baby bed for your antique car.
Nice. Is this like Dave Grohl announcing that he's had another child out of wedlock on Instagram? Is this how you're going to announce it, Linus?
That guy, he really embraced it.
Yeah, he really did. He's really like, it was a Taylor Swift endorsement, and then Dave Grohl, like, by the way.
He was trying to slide under the radar there. He was like, I'm going to time this just right so nobody sees it.
Yeah,
but
nobody sees it.
Everyone saw it.
Didn't work. Yeah,
so, Linus, did they make a running board
kind of
crib?
Worked. It kind of worked.
It kind of worked.
Do they make a running board crib?
For dogs, yes, but not for babies.
Oh, that's too bad. That's really too bad.
No, not that I'm aware of. It lives inside the car.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a hammock that you could put them in at night. But
even in the 20s, you weren't allowed to keep your baby on the running board.
If you stop suddenly enough, the hammock just starts spinning.
Yeah.
And it just tosses them right out. And that allegedly was safer than being in an accident inside the car.
Well, speaking of being safer than being in an accident inside the car, we're all gathered together today to talk about the summer breakdown.
That's exactly right. It's that time of year when you guys embark on an insane, death-defying adventure that requires long distances and out-of-date vehicles that are likely to break down or cause bodily injury, likely both. And this year, it's a total departure from your normal vehicles in that you are extremely well prepared in very modern vehicles that you've spent a long time preparing and testing, and you've gone to a place that is very well supported and easy to get help. I assume.
I think that you're reading the wrong memo.
Oh, no. Oh, wait. I'm sorry.
True.
I was holding it upside down. It's actually the opposite of all of those things. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, wow. So let's just talk about from the very beginning here on what exactly this adventure is. Let's start with the vehicle that you guys, before we even talk about the adventure, the vehicle that you guys decided to take on this adventure wasn't something you necessarily planned. This was something you kind of happened upon.
Well, yes, that's true. We had a gentleman reach out to us looking for a Series 1 pickup truck. And, he wanted to do a project, and we thought this particular car was a good example. It was a North American spec, rust-free, fairly original 107 pickup. And then he ended up having to apparently move to Africa. So he wasn't able to do the project. So we had this 107 that we had procured for him, and it had been sitting for about 45 years, and we were like, what are we going to do with this thing? We've got all these other projects. And then Linus was like, hey, the Model T Club is thinking about doing this traverse of the White Rim Trail in Moab, Utah. And we were,
and for those who don't know, when you say the Model T Club,
yes,
you mean not folks of Mr. T, the famous 1980s bodybuilding icon, but
That's what we thought, and that's why we
Right.
joined originally, only to be
Originally.
disappointed.
Right. That in fact, it's sort of the antithesis of that, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
the
So, sorry, go ahead, Linus.
The Model T Club is a group of people out in Central Oregon, and they're actually very active. This may be one of the most active car clubs that I've been able to be part of. And they have a large number of people in it's not really a club, it's just a loose grouping of people who like Model Ts, but there's not actually quite a few of them, but there's a
They have
core
hats.
group.
It's a club.
Yeah, there's a core group of 2 to 4 of them who are the most active.
Right.
We did look at trying to get a Model T and preparing it for the trip, but apparently there's a little bit of a difference in terms of a 100-year-old car that you have no parts for and a 70-year-old car that you have almost everything for.
Right.
That kind of made our decision for us.
Yeah,
so.
it's a little bit of a difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you say Model T, you really mean like Henry Ford's Model T Ford. Like, this is not some kind of highly modified King of the Hammers Model T. This is essentially a Model T Ford that you would, when you picture a Model T Ford, this is what you're talking about. Not
We
good
found the Achilles heel of the Model T is, they're incredibly capable. You would not expect, they have
Right.
really good articulation. They have low gears and they have a lot of clearance,
Right. Yeah.
They have a lot
Like
of
a wagon,
clearance
sort of.
underneath.
So yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They're pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, tall spoked wheels,
Yeah.
they're light. So all
Yeah.
of those things make them excellent climbers, and you'd be really surprised to see some of the hills that these guys are able to climb with their Model Ts that some, newer four-wheel drives would struggle with.
But yeah, they don't weigh 6 tons, so it's that makes a
Helps.
big difference. It makes a
It
big
helps.
difference. You got all that shit on the
2,200
running boards
pounds,
there.
something like that, I think is what they weigh.
Wow,
It's pretty cool.
that's amazing.
It's pretty cool,
Yeah,
but
that's
it
so
is
cool.
the sensation that you get when you're riding in a Model T is not one like a rigid modern car where the body is not moving around you. This is like being on a sinking ship where there's creaking going on. There, the ship is moving around you. It's flexing. It's like driving a hammock. It's like driving a hammock.
Back to your car. So you have this Series 1 pickup, 107 pickup, one of my favorite Land Rovers of all time. Certainly one that I crave above all things. I covet like Dave Grohl covet. Well, never mind. But you had obviously you'd purchased this for somebody and planned on restoring it. What condition was this car in? It had been sitting for 40 some odd years. Was this something that was ready to take on an expedition with a bunch of Model T Fords? What was it? Was it a runner when you found it after sitting for 40 years?
We to be honest, we viewed our role in this trip as sort of a support vehicle for their effort to do this traverse, which they had been wanting to do for a long time.
So what better
And-
vehicle to take than something that hadn't run in 40 years?
Yeah, and a little background: the White Rim Trail is about 100 miles.
Something that couldn't be supportive.
Yeah, it's about 100-mile off-road trail, so it's lengthy for an off-road trail.
Serious.
But
it's not for the faint of heart. It's difficult and very long and
it's
requires
in a
permission,
remote-
right? You can't just go and do it. You have to file for a permit, right?
You do have to get a permit, yes. And, it is a remote area, so you want to be prepared. And this vehicle was not that. It was not prepared. It was not ready to go. As I said, it literally came out of a barn in Idaho about 5 weeks, 6 weeks before this trip. And it had been sitting for about 45 years. And we didn't do a lot to it until about 3 weeks before the trip. And then we were like, oh, we didn't find a Model T. What are we going to take? And I suggested that we maybe get this thing on the road and ready to go. And Linus was like, no, that's not a good idea at all. And that doesn't sound like very much fun. But, we thought we could do it. It had, as they say, good bones and a cool look to it. And we just started working on it. But to answer your question, it had been used quite hard on a ranch in Idaho, and so it had a lot of bumps and bruises from that, and the tailgate didn't quite shut right and the doors didn't quite shut right. So essentially we kind of stripped it down to just about the bulkhead and chassis, I would say. We took almost everything else off of it: engine, transmission, transfer case, front and rear axles, drive shafts, kind of the whole meal deal. And we just got busy and started at one end of the car and worked our way towards the other end of the car.
So what exactly did the car need? I mean, basically everything. Like
Yeah,
pretty
everything
much,
needed to
pretty
be
much.
rebuilt. It was no part of it was useful.
Sorry, go ahead, Linus.
Oh, I was just going to say it did run when it came to us,
Did it?
Oh wow.
Sort of just barely, and it had a rattly bearing in it, so the motor was not really viable. And the transmission, the previous owner had combined some different transmissions into one to make a transmission. So it didn't have the right bell housing, and the transmission worked, but we really didn't know what was going on in there. And there was a lot of sort of mysteries about how it had been made to work, because all the pieces weren't necessarily the right ones to go with each other. And so it had to be investigated.
Right.
So I think maybe one of the first things we did was yank the motor out, and then it just went from there.
It got pretty involved. We replaced all the wiring. There was some little bit of welding we had to do to repair some of the dented cross members and that sort of thing, just so everything would fit back, in the same place.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything got attention, the swivels, the wheel bearings, the brakes, the wiring, the engine, transmission, fuel system. We tried not to overlook anything. There's hundreds of different components and thousands of smaller components, and it seems like even in a really good, really complete truck, there's always a few hundred parts missing.
Yeah.
After so long,
it got new seats. It got some new sliding windows. There was no tailgate. We got a good tailgate from a good friend of ours and supplier, which was Greg Forbin, Forbin Brothers. He supplied us a really good tailgate from a pickup that he was going to turn into a flatbed. We put some nice sink mats in it. We added a dual gauge. It really needed a lot. And the tub on it was pretty bent and structurally sort of falling apart. So we took the tub off and replaced some of the braces below and did a lot of riveting and straightening to the tub to make it not fall off when we were driving. And we added a capstan winch as well.
Oh, nice.
So
that
way that the Model Ts could benefit from that. We didn't end up needing it, but it would have been actually maybe kind of fun to at least pretend we used it once.
Well, we could have used it at one stage for sure.
We could have.
But we added some recovery points to the front and the back, the hitch pin and the toe ring in the front, and just so we could move another vehicle or move this vehicle if push came to shove, so to speak.
Also, it got a set of tires that are historically important to us. They came from my old Series 1 pickup. And when I bought that, in maybe 2016 from you, Ike. And Rebecca had a set of these Yokohama 750/16 tires on her 107 wagon.
Yeah.
And I think she still does. And I said, oh, I really like those. And I bought myself a set. And when we did our 2019 Eastern Oregon trip, we got into the snow. And they're great tires. They are awful in snow.
Yeah, not good in the snow.
So I immediately replaced them and sold them to Ike. And they've been sitting in the container. And we finally were able to find a good use for them. And they really look good on that
They
truck.
do. They look really cool.
They look
Becca
really
was here at the
super
shop
cool.
just a week or so ago, and she still has them on her car.
Yeah.
So
great.
this
Very cool looking.
The preparation of this Land Rover reminds me of that wedding rhyme. Something, what is it? Something old,
borrowed.
something new, something borrowed, and something blue.
Yeah.
It's pretty much exactly what we did.
There you go. So you built a car from scratch, basically, to go and do this. Yeah,
there was a 2-week period of pretty long days to get it completed for the trip. I think we ended up working 7 days a week, 12 or 14 hours a day on this. But
no other customer work was done in this period.
There was some, but not as much as there should have been, maybe.
So at the end of that period, you have a working 107 pickup back on the road and ready, expedition prepared.
So the day
will.
before we left, we were leaving the next morning as early as reasonably possible. And we took it for a 6-mile test drive.
Right, as is appropriate for a 2-week-long white rim trail.
And the only major component that we didn't overhaul was the transfer case, and it started making some noise. And so we initially thought it was the drive shaft or something, and it ended up being that the had excessive play in the rear bearing of the transfer.
Measuring that preload.
Not entirely true. You can remove the intermediate gear and test the preload on that, I suppose.
You could do that. You could. But just taking a shim out is kind of a gamble because you don't know if you've taken enough or too many. And if you've taken too many without really testing, you can't
You're just going to start wearing.
You could make it wear out or get hot. Yeah. So because of our extreme familiarity and expert understanding, we were able to randomly select the correct number of shims to
That's
remove
exactly right.
and have it be completely perfect and accurate.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. Yes.
We have a very, very high, tolerance. Low tolerance, high tolerance, low tolerance.
Whatever tolerance is correct.
We have an extremely accurate ichrometer.
That's right.
In the shop.
Yeah. And, we can smell how many shims need to come out.
Yeah, just based on the smell, the taste of the fluid that comes out of the transfer case.
We consult the mechanics almanac, and the phase of the moon. And,
based on the season, burn some sage, and based on that, you can tell the right shim pack to put back in there. Well, there you go. That's so you've done your 6-mile test drive. You've randomly pulled out some shims and ready to hit the trail.
So we load up all of our gear and we start driving to Moab, and it's normally about a 15-hour drive from Springfield, Oregon, and you go
and
across.
That's Springfield, Oregon, not Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah,
so you don't have to worry about
your pets
securing your pets before you.
Correct. So this trip, it takes us across eastern Oregon and into Idaho, and then down into Utah, and then into southern Utah.
Absolutely beautiful drive through there.
Whole area. So we're camping along the way, and the first day we get a little froggy, and we get kind of off of the interstate to take a slightly what we think is going to be more scenic route that takes about 20 minutes longer than the standard route. Unfortunately, that was drive your combine on the highway day in Idaho.
Sure, right. I think that's every day in Idaho, by the way.
Later we learned that it is a weekly holiday, not a yearly holiday.
And it turned out to be about as scenic as the inside of a tunnel.
Oh.
Like if you're in a very scenic area and you pass into a tunnel, you are driving through the scenic area, but you can't see it.
You can't see
Basically, that's what happened to us.
Oh, darn it.
But the combine was a fun. We got to do something really fun with the combine. I'm sure Ike was getting to that, but it was sort of a Dukes of Hazzard maneuver. It was it was going very slow. It had a wide load truck in front of it and behind it.
It was not exactly a combine. It was some sort of harvester of immense size. It was so large that it took up both lanes of the road, and
they couldn't pull over. There was nowhere for them to go, so you're just stuck behind it.
The wheels were tilting like at a 45-degree angle on both sides, and it would kind of walk back and forth across the highway, and they were towing it with a tracked a huge tracked tractor.
Whoa.
And they were going about 10 miles an hour. And
It's about as fast as those go, I think. Yeah.
it is. And Linus called it a potato baler. Giant potato baler. So after being behind that thing for probably 45 minutes or an hour and not being able to pass anywhere, because our truck is relatively large, there was just no place to pull over and pass. We kind of looked at a map and we saw a potential side road to a small unincorporated community that we thought we might be able to get ahead of them by going around. And so we took we got off the highway. We took this side road. We violated a couple of local ordinances, and we started back towards the highway. This is probably a 4 mile offshoot off the highway, and we
dirt.
it's total dirt road, and we're bouncing down this dirt road, and we can see them. We can see them coming. At 10 miles an hour,
Right.
and we're trying to get ahead of them, and so we speed up a little bit, and we get to the intersection, and by a stroke of amazing luck,
by 30 seconds.
Not by much. We were able to get ahead of the combine safely, I would add. And we were celebrating that we had managed to get out of this quagmire of a traffic situation, right? And there's all these cars that were behind them, and Linus is like, I hope they saw how good we did.
I hope at least somebody saw what we were able to accomplish.
So we get ahead of these folks, and then after another hour, it's just getting about dark, and we decide that we're going to camp, right? And we pull off the road at this lake, this large reservoir that local folks use for fishing and whatnot. Really nice spot to camp, and we decided we'd stay there for the night. We set up camp, and I'll be damned, I didn't sleep very well at all. The fish in the lake were making such a racket that it kept me up all night. You don't really think of a fish as being a noisy animal, but in this particular
damn noisy fish. That's the problem with Idaho.
They wouldn't
right?
stay in the water. They just kept
busy.
jumping.
It's just a noisy fish problem.
At one point, I thought there was an animal wading along the shoreline, and I shined a light down towards the lake, and it was just all a bunch of fish jumping around. So, yeah, don't stay at Boudreaux Reservoir. The fish are really active about 2 a.m.
Interesting. Okay, good to know. Good. That's a pro tip.
So we get back on the road, and I'm like, we're on our way back to the road, and I say, wouldn't it be funny if that combine was
still going
down the road? And holy shit, it was there, and it was ahead of us.
Oh no!
We couldn't decide if they had also pulled off and stayed, or they had just been driving all night at 10 miles an hour.
Oh no.
So we were stuck behind it for another 45 minutes.
We were stuck
behind him again for another 45 minutes. And then, we get ahead of the combine, we get into Utah, and we start going into Salt Lake, and there's a traffic slowdown. And there's an incident. There's some incident response vehicles. There's some police, pretty large Department of Transportation presence. And we're like, what's going on? There must be a fender bender on the highway. There must be something. And as we're driving by, there is an officer with a large pig on a leash. And apparently a pig had fallen out of the truck. Onto the highway and had been running around on the highway. So we had
he had a little bit of a grated ham situation going on there, but he was not in too bad a shape for a pig that fell out onto the highway.
But he's still not alive.
He was.
He was alive. Very much alive.
Very much.
He was walking around on the highway. Yeah.
He was on a leash. So he
was on a leash, but. No.
I'm hoping that he somehow worked his way out of the circle of life and was able to find a different path to go down. His celebrity earned him.
Do you think that's how it works?
A pass out of the trip to the
being cast in the next Babes.
I'm not sure.
People.
Yeah, do you think like he goes to the county fair now? It's like, this is the pig that fell out of the
You
truck
know,
on the
I mean,
highway. Is that maybe how it works?
that's my
Hey,
hope.
Okay, all
you
right.
don't eat a pig like that all at once.
Yeah, he's a pretty special
that's
guy.
a miracle
Okay.
pig. That's a special pig.
Okay.
So we had a pig related slowdown, but other than that, the rest of the trip down to Moab was pretty fantastic. And as you get into Utah, obviously you see a lot of really wonderful scenery. So we saw some great places, some wonderful overlooks.
Yeah, the last time I was in
dramatic-
Moab was the 2008 Land Rover National Rally.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
In
yeah.
which I also saw Ike there. He was
Oh.
there too. Yeah.
It's
There
true.
you go. There you go.
So we were reunited with our Moab, Utah.
hmm
And
It was a great
so good.
I think we got
Yeah.
I think we got into a Model T camp around 5 or 6 or something like that. Just
reasonable hour.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
too bad. And
Combines aside, yeah.
And we decided that we needed some supplies. You
Okay.
know,
You hadn't up to this point gotten any supplies.
we had
Yeah, we
packed
just-
a few things from home, but it was a depressing variety of meals. You know,
Okay, I
you
see.
could
Yeah.
survive off of it, but it was not exciting. So
Wasn't great. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So having driven our Land Rover a total of 6 miles, we thought it would
Yep.
also be a good opportunity to put a few more miles on it.
Sure.
So
Why not? Yeah.
yeah, camp was about 15 miles away from Moab, 15, 16 miles away,
Mhm.
something like that.
Mhm.
And we unloaded the Land Rover and we decided, oh, we're going to drive it into town. And
Yep.
as we were leaving the camp, Linus is like, hey, do you think we should bring any tools? And I said something like, oh, if it'll make it 6 miles, it'll make it, 600 miles
Of course.
or whatever.
Of course. It will.
And immediately
dun,
it,
dun,
it
dun.
started as we were driving down this big steep it's basically downhill,
Of course.
like several thousand feet into Moab. It's
Yep.
like 2,000 feet elevation drop into
Mhm.
Moab. And so we're driving down this long steep road, and it's overheating going downhill.
Oh, that's
And we're
always a
like,
good sign. Yeah.
Oh, that's not good for our off-road 100-mile slow slog.
Mm-hmm.
It does not bode well. And we kind of coasted all the way into the grocery store in Moab, Utah, like 16.
Yeah, with the temperature
miles.
gauge like at right on 212.
Ooh. Yeah, that's not great. That's not great. That's
Not
not what
ideal.
you want to see. Yep.
Not ideal.
Yep.
So one of the things that we hadn't done before we left was check the timing on the Land Rover. We were kind of thinking, oh, maybe it's the this or that, or maybe it just doesn't have enough water. Or
We did put
there's
an
a leak
aftermarket
or-
water pump on it right before too.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we were thinking maybe when they pressed the impeller on, it was too far away from the water pump
Right.
casting, and it wasn't really
Yeah.
pumping
It wasn't
any
really
water, even
causing
though it was
pumping,
spinning,
yeah,
And
We had a lot of theories, but what we didn't
Lots
have
of theories.
were tools.
Tools.
So we,
And of course, that's a mechanical water. That's a mechanical temperature gauge. So
It
that unfortunately can't be chalked up to just maybe a bad ground fault or something. Maybe it's fine. Just ignore it.
It was
definitely
obvious. It was hot.
It was
hot. It
100%
smelled hot.
too hot.
It felt hot. It was hot.
Yeah, it was warm.
Mm.
So, because we didn't have any tools, we thought, well, maybe it's getting warm because the timing is too advanced. And so we retarded the timing using the octane selector. We didn't even have a wrench to loosen the distributor, and
It's a
so
good
we
trick,
just
though. The little octane selector
Gives us a
knobby,
degree or
that's,
two, maybe.
works.
it gives us a little bit of adjustment there. So we adjusted it and we set it out with a few groceries, and it was a little cooler, but we were also had that huge long climb back to our camp. We were like, oh, not sure. We had some water with us, but it behaved itself. It was definitely more stable going back to camp. And once we had reached camp, we were like, oh, we're pretty relieved, and we think, oh, we're probably pretty good. We're probably pretty good for this trip that we're going to set off on at like 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Mhm.
So that's the extent of our testing that we were able to do before the trip.
Did you
And-
look any more into the temperature at that point?
Oh,
or-
absolutely not.
I
No,
think we
absolutely not. No.
we did static time it the next morning to try to get it
Okay, yeah.
closer.
We
You
did.
know, but that's all we
Yeah.
did, and for the most part, that cured it. It still got
Mhm.
warm, and there's something else is going on. Possibly,
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
time it with a timing light, but the radiator may be not as efficient as it could be, or the thermostat may not be opening all the way, but it was able to
May not
make
be
the whole trip
great.
without really overheating at all. It
Just
just
getting warm, but
warmer
not
than you might have expected it
you
But
to.
not
kind of
hot.
wanted to, but yeah.
Yeah,
It did good.
It did pretty well,
really
I
good.
think.
We did have a different mechanical problem along the way, but
Yeah, these 100-year-old cars, I was fully expecting there to be some, fettling and fitting.
Well, I would
but
expect there to be basically constant breakdowns, like essentially be
Yeah,
a
yeah,
series
it
of
was
breakdowns
us.
as you go. Just
they were pretty well tested machines. They
That's
had
fantastic.
taken these cars on a lot of trips.
Yes,
And
right. So
they
they're
had kinda,
a battle hardened
I
fleet
Yeah.
of
I
Model
did a
Ts.
trip with those guys about a month before this trip, and on that trip, one of the Model Ts burned out a rod bearing.
Okay,
and
well, that's
the
not
other
nothing.
Model T didn't really. It was sputtering a little bit, and a brake light
Mhm.
switch failed. But
Okay,
the Model T that lost a
minor,
rod
yeah.
bearing, those guys carry connecting rods under the seat with new Babbitt in them. That's already sized to
Right,
their crankshaft. So he
right,
just
right,
threw one of
right,
those in, and then his car was ready to come to Moab. So
right.
So he had all his big failures.
They know the
before
things that are
trip.
going to go and are pretty well. And I imagine those engines are so simple, relatively speaking, that you don't exactly need a heap of parts to fix them, as
they don't
they're
even
just not
they
that advanced.
they don't even
you
have
know?
water pumps. Model Ts are
Right,
they run on
right,
convection siphon.
right,
So
right.
they're
right.
But the other thing that really helps the Model T reliability is they only travel at 1 RPM. They
those
only
guys
go
drive
1 mile an
slow.
hour. Yeah. So nothing ever wears out. Nothing ever wears out or goes bad because they just go so
Now,
slow.
are you saying that the car is capable of more, but they simply limit it to
Both.
that?
It's a pretty
It's a
rough.
pretty rough
It's a
ride.
pretty rough ride
Both.
inside the
I
Model
think
T.
the maximum
it's,
RPM that any of those cars did on this trip was maybe 750 RPM.
pretty slow. It's pretty slow. And that was another thing that we weren't used to. We weren't used to
Idling everywhere.
being in a group of vehicles and being the newest, fastest, most comfortable car.
Most luxurious
So-
Series 1 pickup truck.
So these guys,
Mhm.
there's Dennis, who has
Yeah.
a Model T convertible, and then his buddy Jim, who
Mhm.
has a Model T Model T pickup, and then
Mhm.
their wives, Mary and Melody, and
The most patient women in North America.
they
imagine.
constantly wanted to ride in the Land Rover.
You don't
They
get
were
that
like,
really a lot.
That's
Yeah.
really unusual, right? They
It
were
was
like,
very
"Oh, it's
unusual.
so comfortable and fast."
It must have been the air conditioning, I guess.
Yeah, it must have
Yeah.
been the air conditioning.
Yeah.
So a Series 1 Land Rover is comfortable and fast compared to these cars.
That really is saying something. I mean, that really gives you perspective at how
really
awful
does.
it must be to be in a Model T.
Awful.
They're just a
Awful.
little bit more bouncy, because they don't have any type
Yeah.
of shock absorber. So when you go around a bump, you're
Yeah.
swaying and bouncing up in the air. It's not that the ride is rough;
Yes.
it's just bouncy.
Right. It's
The
bouncy.
ride is
yeah.
also
I mean,
rough.
Yeah. It's also
It's not just that,
No,
it's
it's not.
bouncy.
It
just
isn't.
that.
It's
It's a
layers. Number of
layers.
things.
There's
when
layers.
you're
It's
bouncing
nuanced.
around,
It's a
like
number
your,
of things that make those
your
cars horrible.
elbow
Oh.
bounces up and down on the door, and
It's a lot of sharp edges,
edges.
and it's really an unpleasant experience. And to make it more unpleasant, both of these guys were driving with their canopies down.
Okay.
In the like hot desert sun, and so they were all like just
was warm.
baking in the sun.
I was going to ask, what was the weather like?
High 80s, low 90s Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So not
not
horrible,
terrible, but that's not
but a
not
hot sun.
cool
A hot sun.
by any chance. Yeah. And cloudless, I
wanted
imagine,
to-
as it has been here on
We
the West
wanted
Coast.
to have the top off the Series 1 because it's such an iconic look, but
It's like
it
a-
would have been just
yeah.
brutal.
It's also a
It
little
would have been
oven.
brutal.
Yeah.
Those guys,
yeah. Better with the top on, you think?
yes, keeping out of the
Yes.
sun.
Yes,
Those guys,
absolutely.
though,
Yeah, yeah.
Dennis has a roadster, and
Yeah.
Jim's is a Roadster pickup, and they run primarily with their tops down, and they're from the desert. They're from Central Oregon.
Right.
They're
They're desert people.
hardened,
Yeah.
and they have a thick layer of burned crust to protect them. So they can just deal with it. I don't know how.
Yeah.
They're just better
Yeah.
people than we
They're
are.
they're they're very old and all their nerves don't work, so they can't even feel it.
They're like an
Yeah.
Italian handbag. They're just leather. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Jim
Yeah.
did put his top up because Melanie is
Yeah.
more susceptible to the heat than he is.
Sensible.
So he did,
Yes.
but
She's a
Mary and
normal human
Dennis,
being.
they
Yeah,
toughed it
yeah.
out. They're like
Wow.
two lizards on a rock, just watching the world go by.
They're like when we'll
Yeah.
have some shade when the
Yeah.
sun goes
Yeah.
down. I'm pretty sure I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's admirable. So let's talk then about your mechanical misadventures along the
I
way. So
would
how
say-
did the Series 1 perform?
I would say we had almost
It's
zero
true.
problems. It
Mhm.
really didn't have any issues whatsoever. It was extremely reliable. It started every time.
Mhm.
We didn't really have any problems until we started to climb a very steep, very long slope.
Mhm.
And at that time it started to lose fuel pressure.
Okay.
And the engine was stumbling a little bit. And I don't know if you've ever worked on a Series 1, if you're listening. This one had the stock, fuel lines and fuel pump and sediment bowl.
Yep.
There's somewhere between 700 and 750 junctions and
That's right.
fittings
Yeah.
in that system.
Yeah.
And so one of those
It goes
had-
for about 6 years before there's another little
Mhm.
nut and junction to
Yes.
tighten up. Yeah.
So one of those little junctions had the tiniest air leak. And it was causing us a little bit of headache. It's not like it wouldn't climb
It
the
would
slope. It
stall
would. It
and
was
then
just
restart.
sputtering and stalling.
Sucking a lot of air through that
And-
tiny little hole. Yeah.
So that was a frustration that towards the end of the trip, in fact, the very longest, steepest hill, we finally, took the time to track it down and cure it. But until then,
we
on the
tried
long, steep
by
slopes, it was
tightening everything.
troublesome.
But it turned out that
Right.
in order to properly fix it, something actually had to be disassembled and corrected in order to make it go away.
And corrected. Yeah. It was something was a little pinched or something, or it was a little
It
misseated.
misseated, and and tightening it couldn't fix it, so it had to be
couldn't fix it, yeah.
fixed. But until you
Yeah.
disassemble the thing, you wouldn't have ever known that was where the problem.
You never
was.
know.
So we were thinking, the fuel pump's no good. Pickup tube, it's got a hole in
Right.
it. It just
Right.
took us a little
Right.
while to find it. And the other
Narrow it down.
part of this, is that the Model T group has a tradition of giving out an award called the Golden Turd, which is the person who has the most problems on the trip. And so,
Yeah.
the less time we spent fiddling with our car, the less likelihood we would have of earning this award.
I
So
see.
we sort of tried to play it
I see.
off and continue driving without really working on the car. And so
I see.
the argument now becomes, we stumbled several times and looked under the hood several times. So is that one problem? Because it was one problem that took us several attempts to resolve. Or
see.
is it multiple problems because of how many times we had to fiddle with it? So that's an argument that will come up in the next chamber meeting where the vote is held to see who wins the turd. And the Golden Turd Award is
I see.
basically
Yeah.
a Model T era Ford script in brass that you buy, and it goes on your radiator. And they've cut the F and the O. So instead of saying Ford, it says turd. And then you earn it, and you have to
Nice.
carry it on your car until somebody else earns it from you.
Ooh.
And everybody
That sounds
gets
great.
it.
I mean,
It's
that's
just a fun thing.
It's a badge of honor.
But
It's a badge of honor. Yeah.
I think all the
They
cars
did,
did really
yeah.
well. We didn't really have any significant problems. Even the air leak that we had ultimately only took about 15-20 minutes to resolve. And I think considering the group of cars was like collectively, 270 years old, the number of problems that we had was pretty minor. And
Now,
and
was the
not of
group of
consequence.
cars older than the group of car owners? That's
Absolutely
the question.
not.
Yeah.
There were more
Yeah.
car owners, so
Right. So collectively older.
collectively older for sure.
Yeah.
But still, it just everybody did really well. Everybody was, actually, in all honesty, well prepared. And so there was very few issues, and so consequently we got to see a lot of amazing country. The White Rim Trail is just a super impressive area, and there's just canyon after canyon of incredible rock formations and dramatic scenery there you can see for dozens and dozens of miles. Like, it's just really another planet out there. The road was built what in the 20s,
I
Linus?
I thought it was the 50s. It was like a uranium mining time. So like World War II
Yeah,
into
I
the
thought it was a little
50s.
bit earlier than
Maybe
that.
the original road. I guess it was originally an Indian trail. But it was the 50s where they sort of really started getting funding to work out there and build roads to search for uranium. And, many, many piles of money were invested and very few piles of uranium were
Uraniums.
achieved.
Yeah.
They spent millions of dollars, and the only person that made any money on it was the two that built the road. So
Yeah. Well, that's how it goes sometimes,
incredible area, really sought after trip for motorcyclists, mountain bikers, outdoor enthusiasts. Really cool area. There's a few established campgrounds along the way, but by and large, it's just out in the middle of nowhere.
Services,
And
no cell service.
no.
And,
And speaking of which, we stopped for lunch very briefly, and we were setting up like a little shade or a little shelter, and sitting there in the sand was a cell phone.
Oh,
Somebody had dropped it, taking a picture or
not just
or
somebody,
taking off. And
Chunk Wang Chu.
yes,
Oh.
later we found that the owner of the phone was named Chung Wang Chu, and we
did
decided.
Did you find Chung Wan Chu?
Well, we gave it a good try. So
Yeah.
it did have some charge, but it was locked.
And in airplane
so
mode.
we thought, oh, we'll just, So we thought, oh, we would just, you can access the camera. So we thought we'd send him record a little message for him, and then we'd turn it into the Park Service.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah, we did create a little video of our Model T camp for them to see. Yeah. But I was able to get in a long roundabout way through to somebody that knows that person, and I was able to tell them that we were turning it in and where
Chung
to.
Wan Chu. What an amazing opportunity for Chung Wan Chu to experience your camp. Yeah, exactly. Participate in the trip. Yeah. Wow. The Model T bombs of Central Oregon. Yeah, Chung Wan Chu. Well, that's fantastic. That's very cool. If only all of us could experience a camp via lost cell phone, that would be what a treat. What a treat. Well, what do you think in closing here? What are the highlights of the trip? What do you think? What was your favorite part?
The scale is just immense. You stand next to these ravines and you can't even see the bottom of the ravine, and you toss a pebble or a small rock over and you listen for it, and it takes 10 seconds for it to hit the bottom. It's just another level of just scale, and it makes you feel very small and insignificant, but in a good way. We had some really lovely evenings. The stars out there are really wonderful. We did do another trail on the second day, and it was a sandy trail, and that reminds me that in the exit to the White Rim Trail, there's a couple of sandy spots, and the Model Ts both got immediately stuck.
They don't do sand, hey?
Couldn't proceed. No, that was their Achilles heel.
Yeah.
Very narrow wheels. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were very happy to be recovered, and it sounded like there would be a lot of work to install the sand ropes and
do
make
that
a recovery point.
Yeah.
So
because I imagine getting enough wheel speed to sort of start to float those tires is just not possible.
No.
And obviously just ropes. I mean, that's kind of an interesting idea, I guess, sort of make paddle tires out of rope. But
that brings up another issue with the Model Ts that I wasn't previously aware of. The design of their wheels and the way that the wheel and inner tube interact with the wheel requires that they run 50 pounds of pressure in their tires. So that not only contributes to the rough ride, but also the low traction on soft surfaces.
Yeah, hard to run a low pressure. And I suppose there's no wood spoke rim bead locks. back then. They really
No,
didn't do
you know,
that.
we talked about that too, and I
Yeah.
asked them, I said, you know, could you glue your wheel
Right.
to the rim?
Yeah.
And they thought, well, maybe that would possibly
how would you
allow
have
them to run
solved
to
that in the
lower pressure.
1920s, right? What would they have done?
They probably just wouldn't
The
run a
ropes, yeah.
tire at all and just weld like metal
Yeah,
paddles
metal paddles. Yeah. Well, it
on
probably
it or
would work.
something.
But yeah, you know, the combination of wheel speed and a wide footprint is obviously how we now get around floating on top of sand. And it sounds like those are the two things that they just can't do. So yeah, sand would be pretty bad.
Sand was bad, but
yeah.
you know, the Land Rover was easily pulled them out. Like didn't feel like there was much of a load on it because they're so light. So I guess
So
that's
light,
the
yeah.
benefit is that
Yeah.
even when you're stuck in a Model T,
Right. It's
they're
not
pretty easy to extract
Yeah,
because
it's
they
not
don't
that-
weigh a lot.
not that heavy again. Yeah.
But who off-roads the Model T anyway? Nobody. Only these crazy guys.
Only these crazy guys.
We sure had a good time, and we're so glad that they invited us to come along. And I hope at least they told us that they enjoyed having the Land Rover and having us along with them. It was a great time. I really enjoyed the whole process, start to finish, for taking something that is basically an undrivable vehicle and making it, you know, ready for an epic trip. That's one of my favorite things to do, and I think we ticked all the boxes with this trip. I really had a lot of fun doing that.
Well, that's fantastic. And another summer breakdown in the books, and certainly an epic one at that. Another 100-year-old vehicle. You guys, you know, just keep knocking them down. We love you for it. You keep finding more 100-year-old cars to go hang out with. So yeah, maybe next time we'll venture out into airplanes or something. I don't know. If
that's
this
a good
hasn't
idea.
killed you, we obviously have to get
We
more
should take
inventive.
we should take airplanes on the White Rim Trail.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
We don't take off. We just
No,
motor
don't take off,
along.
just taxi. Yeah, the whole way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's going to be great. All right. Well, with that, it's been another fantastic adventure. And Linus, it is always a pleasure and good to see you. And Ike, we'll talk to you next week. And that we'll take from here.
All right. See you soon.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Beres, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Beres. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.